Welcome to this peaceful moment. Here, you will discover stories inspired by the quiet beauty of Japan. Each tale is like a soft breeze through a bamboo grove, carrying you away from the worries of the day. Imagine the scent of blooming cherry blossoms and the gentle flow of a nearby clear stream. Let these words and sounds cradle your mind in calm and serenity. Tonight, permit yourself to drift into a restful sleep. Let us begin this journey together. The Fox's Quiet Watch. Prologue. The Silent Guardian. At the edge of a forgotten village, where the forest pressed close and the mountains cast long shadows, there stood a weathered shrine. Its gates leaned with age, its offerings often forgotten, yet it endured. Few still prayed there. The elders said it belonged to a fox spirit, who long ago had promised to guard the village in exchange for respect. Generations passed. The people grew busy with fields and trade, forgetting the old ways. Yet, each evening, as the sun dipped and the cicadas hushed, a fox would sit quietly near the mossy steps, its amber eyes steady, its ears pricked toward the village below. No one noticed. No one remembered. But the fox still kept its watch. Chapter 1. The Girl at the Shrine. Aya, a young girl of 16, often sought solitude by the old shrine. She was different from her peers, more comfortable with silence than chatter. While others laughed at the river or worked the rice fields, Aya wandered into the forest, basket in hand, collecting herbs. One twilight, she climbed the worn stone steps and found the fox sitting before the shrine's door. Its fur was the color of rust, tipped in white, and its eyes reflected the last light of the day. Aya froze. The fox did not move. "Are you waiting for something?" she asked softly, though she knew it was silly to speak to an animal. The fox tilted its head, as though listening. Aya placed her herbs down as an offering on the step. "For you. If you are the spirit that guards this place." The fox's tail brushed against the ground once, like the faintest acknowledgement, before it vanished into the trees. Aya blinked. A moment it had been there, the next only the forest remained. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Village. Rumors soon began. "The girl speaks to foxes," some whispered. "She lingers in the woods too long. Perhaps the spirits favor her. She will bring misfortune if she meddles with them." Aya heard these words but bore them quietly. Her grandmother, the last person who still lit incense at the shrine, told her, "Do not mind them. The fox has always been our protector. If it chooses to listen to you, take care. Spirits remember kindness." Yet even her grandmother's voice carried a shadow of worry. Chapter 3. The First Dream. That night, Aya dreamed. She stood before the shrine, the forest deep and dark around her. Lanterns hung from unseen branches, glowing like fireflies. The fox appeared, taller than before, its form shifting until it stood as a figure cloaked in shadow and flame. Its eyes, however, were the same steady, amber, filled with watchful patience. "You left an offering," the fox spoke, its voice neither male nor female, but carrying the resonance of wind through leaves. "Yes," Aya whispered, trembling. "Why?" "Because you were waiting," she replied, though she could not explain how she knew. The fox lowered its head. "Few see. Fewer still remember. I have watched long, and longer still I must." Aya reached out, wanting to touch its fur, but woke with dawn spilling across her window. Chapter 4: The Omen. In the following weeks, strange things stirred. Chickens were found missing, their feathers scattered near the edge of the woods. At night, wolves howled closer than before. Farmers swore they saw shapes moving along the ridges, shadows too tall to be wolves, too heavy to be deer. The village grew uneasy. Children were kept inside after sunset. Men sharpened spears that they had long neglected. Aya returned to the shrine with fresh herbs. The fox was there, watching. "What threatens us?" she asked. The fox's ears twitched, but it gave no sound. Instead, it stood and padded toward the forest, pausing once to glance back. Aya understood. "You want me to follow." Chapter 5: Into the Forest. The forest grew dense as Aya trailed behind the fox. Shadows stretched, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. They reached a clearing where stones jutted from the ground like broken teeth. The fox stopped. Aya's breath caught. Symbols had been carved into the stone's old runes she did not recognize, smeared now with something dark. The ground was disturbed, clawed as though by beasts. "What is this?" she whispered. The fox looked at her, eyes sharp with warning. She felt words not spoken but pressed into her mind, a boundary broken. Suddenly, the forest stirred. Figures shifted between the trees, gaunt, twisted shapes with eyes glowing faintly red. Aya stumbled back. The fox leapt forward, its form rippling, no longer small and delicate but larger, fur bristling, fangs bared. The creatures hissed and scattered into the shadows. Aya clutched her chest, heart pounding. The fox stood before her, fur glowing faintly as though lit from within. "You guard us still," she breathed. The fox blinked once, then slowly shrank back to its smaller form. Chapter 6: A Pact Renewed. The next day, Aya told her grandmother what she had seen. Her grandmother grew pale. "It is as I feared. Long ago, our ancestors made a pact with the fox spirit. It guarded us from the creatures beyond, in exchange for offerings and remembrance. But we have forgotten and the boundary weakens." Aya's resolve hardened. "Then I must remember. I must keep watch, too." Her grandmother smiled faintly, though sorrow shadowed her eyes. "It is a heavy burden, child. Spirits do not choose lightly." That night, Aya dreamed again. The fox appeared once more in human-like form, its cloak woven of flame and leaves. "You saw the breach," it said. "Yes. You wished to help. Yes. Then you must vow to see as I see, to watch as I watch. For as long as your spirit endures." Aya's throat tightened. She thought of the village, the children, the faces that doubted her. She thought of the fox, waiting century after century. "I vow," she whispered. The fox's eyes glowed brighter. Its paw, or was it a hand, touched her brow. "Then you will keep watch with me." Chapter 7: The Weight of Watching. Days turned to weeks. Aya began to sense things she had not before: the hush of trees bending with hidden movement, the shimmer of air where a boundary weakened, the whisper of voices not human. She grew distant from the other villagers, who already regarded her with suspicion. Only her grandmother believed. Only the fox understood. But Aya did not falter. Each night she returned to the shrine, where the fox sat in silence. Sometimes it would meet her gaze, amber eyes steady, and she felt less alone. Chapter 8: The Night of Ash. It happened suddenly. One moonless night, the creatures surged again, dozens, crawling from the stones, shrieking with hunger. They poured toward the village like a tide of shadow. Aya ran, breathless, clutching only a lantern. At the shrine, the fox awaited. It leapt, growing vast, its fur blazing like fire. Together they stood at the boundary. Aya lifted her lantern high, chanting words she did not know. She knew syllables that burned her tongue but rang true in the night. The fox struck, light and flame lashing against the swarm. The creatures wailed, shriveled, and fled back into the stones. Smoke hung heavy. Aya fell to her knees, trembling. The fox stood beside her, panting. For the first time, it looked weary. "You held the line," Aya whispered. "So did you," the fox answered, voice low. Chapter 9: The Quiet After. The village awoke to find no harm done, though some swore they had heard screams in the night. Aya said nothing. Neither did the fox. Yet from that day forward, Aya bore a subtle glow in her eyes, a quiet watchfulness that unsettled some, comforted others. She knew the truth now. The fox had waited, century after century, not only as guardian but for someone to share its burden. Aya had taken her place beside it. And so, each twilight, when the world hushed and shadows stretched, the fox sat at the shrine's steps, and beside it now sat a girl. Silent, steady, watching. Epilogue: The watch endures. Years passed. Aya grew older, but her eyes never lost their quiet glow. The villagers, though they never fully understood, came to leave offerings again. They spoke of the guardian fox, and of the girl who watched with it. And when strangers came, lost in the mountains, they sometimes glimpsed a figure at the shrine, a fox with fur like fire, and a woman with a lantern in her hand. Always watching, always guarding, until memory itself faded, and still, the watch endured. Blossoms in the misty morning. Prologue: The mist that breathes. The village of Hanamura lay cradled in a valley where mountains wore veils of shifting mist every morning. The air carried the fragrance of damp earth, moss, and above all, cherry blossoms. The trees bloomed earlier here than in most regions. Their petals often caught in a dance with fog that wrapped around the village like a mother's arms. The elders often said, when the blossoms fall within the mist, the boundary between the seen and unseen world becomes fragile. Few paid heed to such sayings anymore. But one girl did. Her name was Kaoru, 17 years old, quiet yet unyielding, with a gaze that lingered on details others ignored. She had grown up listening to her grandmother's stories about spirits who drifted in the morning mist, about blossoms that carried whispers of the past. And while her peers laughed and prepared for the coming planting season, Kaoru often found herself standing beneath the cherry trees, listening. Chapter 1: The First Encounter. On a misty morning in early spring, Kaoru wandered down the old path that led from the village shrine to the river bank. The mist was thick, curling in soft ribbons that brushed her cheeks like cool fingers. Petals floated in the air, their edges blurred in the fog. As she walked, she heard a faint sound. Not the rustle of leaves nor the call of birds, but something like the notes of a flute carried on the mist. She stopped, heart quickening, and peered ahead. There, beneath a great cherry tree, stood a figure. At first, Kaoru thought it was a traveler. But the figure's clothing shimmered faintly, pale as dew, and their hair flowed like silver down their back. They turned, and their eyes clear and deep as still water met hers. "You can see me," the figure said softly. Kaoru's lips parted. "Who are you?" The figure smiled, though sorrow lingered in the curve of their mouth. "I am but a memory, given shape when the blossoms and mist entwine. Few mortals notice me anymore. But your eyes are unclouded." Kaoru's heart trembled, yet she felt no fear. Instead, an inexplicable calm settled over her, as if the mist itself embraced her. Chapter 2: The Spirit's Tale. The spirit introduced itself as Ren, once a guardian of the valley long before the village was built. The cherry trees were planted as part of a pact between humans and spirits as long as blossoms fell each spring. The guardian's strength would flow to protect the land from calamity. But time had eroded faith. People offered fewer prayers, fewer songs. The blossoms still bloomed, yet their power weakened, and Ren's presence faded. "I linger only when mist conceals the world," Ren confessed. "That is when the veil is thinnest. Soon, I may vanish altogether." Kaoru's heart ached at the sorrow in Ren's voice. She thought of her grandmother, who still left offerings at the shrine when no one else bothered. She thought of her yearning for something beyond the visible. "What if could you help me?" she asked. Ren tilted their head. "Why would you, a child of fleeting years, take upon yourself the burden of the eternal?" Kaoru hesitated, but then whispered, "Because beauty should not fade unnoticed. If blossoms fall into mist and no one remembers, then what meaning is left in their bloom?" For the first time, Ren's smile was without sorrow. Chapter 3: Whispers in the Village. In the following days, Kaoru visited the misty grove each morning. She spoke with Ren, listened to stories of the ancient valley, and learned the songs once sung to honor the guardian. But the village began to notice. Some whispered, "She wanders where the mist is thickest." Others muttered, "She speaks to shadows." Even Kaoru's mother frowned. "Kaoru, you are nearly a woman. You should be helping in the fields, not chasing after phantoms." Only her grandmother defended her. "The child sees what we have forgotten. Do not chain her sight. It may be needed yet." Despite the unease growing around her, Kaoru could not stop. Each morning she returned, each morning the blossoms fell in quiet cascades, and each morning Ren was waiting. Chapter 4 The Promise. One dawn, the mist was denser than ever, swallowing even the outlines of the trees. Ren's form flickered, at times almost dissolving into the fog. "It is becoming harder," Ren admitted. "Without remembrance, I cannot remain. The pact between humans and spirits lies broken." Kaoru clenched her fists. "Then let me renew it." "You?" "Yes." She stepped forward. "If no one else will remember, then I will. If no one else will sing, then I will. Let me carry the pact. Let me keep you here." Ren regarded her silently. Finally, they extended a pale hand. "Once you take this vow, your life will no longer be yours alone. You will share your breath with mine. Are you prepared?" Kaoru's heart pounded, but she placed her hand into Ren's. "I am." The mist swirled, blossoms whirled around them, and for a moment the world was filled with light. Chapter 5 The Burden. From that day on, Kaoru felt a difference within herself. She could sense the subtle tremors of the earth, the shifting of winds before storms, the breath of the blossoms as they opened and closed. She knew when rain would fall, when seeds would sprout. But the burden was heavy. She often felt exhausted, her body trembling after long hours in the fields. Villagers noticed her pallor and whispered that she was cursed. Bewitched by the mist, some said. She consorts with ghosts, others muttered. Kaoru bore their suspicion in silence. For when she walked into the misty grove, Ren awaited her, steady and luminous. In Ren's presence, the weariness lifted. "You are stronger than I believed," Ren said one morning. "I only do what must be done," Kaoru replied softly. Chapter 6 The Tempest. Late spring brought an unnatural storm. Clouds roared over the mountains, winds tore at rooftops, and the river swelled beyond its banks. The villagers panicked, believing the valley would be swallowed. In the heart of the tempest, Kaoru felt Ren's call. She ran through the rain to the grove, where blossoms clung desperately to their branches, trembling in the storm. Ren stood tall, but their form wavered like a candle flame in the wind. "The pact must be renewed fully," Ren said. "This storm comes from beyond the valley, from forces that seek to break what remains. Alone, I cannot hold them back. Then I'll stand with you," Kaoru declared. Ren's eyes glowed. "If you do this, Kaoru, you will never again be only human." Kaoru's voice was firm. "I've already chosen." They joined hands. The blossoms tore from the trees in great waves, carried on the wind like silver fire. The mist surged, wrapping around Ren and Kaoru, binding them together. The storm howled, but within the grove, there was only stillness and light. When the winds finally calmed, the village was safe. The river receded, the sky cleared. But Kaoru was never the same again. Chapter 7: The Quiet Guardian. In the weeks that followed, the villagers noticed a change. The fields flourished with unusual vigor. Illness diminished. The air seemed clearer, sweeter. Yet Kaoru herself was different. Her eyes shone faintly in the mist, and when she walked beneath the blossoms, petals seemed to follow her. The villagers grew both fearful and reverent. They began leaving offerings at the shrine once more, whispering prayers to the guardian and the girl who had become part of the mist. Kaoru did not seek their praise. Each morning, she returned to the grove, where Ren's form now stood clearer than ever, strong once more. They would walk together, speaking little, yet understanding much. "I am no longer fading," Ren said one morning. "And I am no longer only Kaoru," she replied with a faint smile. Epilogue: Blossoms Eternal. Years passed, and the story of Kaoru spread. Some said she became a spirit herself, drifting in the mist with Ren. Others claimed she lived a long life but always bore the touch of something otherworldly. What remained certain was this: each spring, when the mist rolled into the valley, and the cherry blossoms began to fall, two figures could be glimpsed walking among the trees. One shimmered like morning fog, the other glowed faintly like dew. Together they kept watch over the valley, bound by a promise made when blossoms fell into mist. And so, the pact endured. The blossoms never ceased to bloom, and the mist each morning whispered the same truth: that beauty lives on, as long as there is someone who remembers. Reflections in the Zen Garden. Prologue: The stillness of sand and stone. The Zen garden lay at the heart of the ancient temple, a quiet space of sand, stone, and carefully placed moss. Its raked patterns were never random. Each line was drawn by the hands of monks at dawn, tracing the ripples of unseen water. To most visitors, it was a place of beauty, serenity, and discipline. Yet to some, it was a mirror. The stones became mountains, the sand became oceans, and the silence carried whispers of the soul. It was here, among these carefully tended patterns, that a young man named Akira often found himself lingering. He was not a monk, nor was he particularly devout. But something about the garden drew him, as if it held answers he had not yet learned to ask. Chapter 1: A Pilgrim of Restlessness. Akira had come to the temple from the city. At 25, he had already felt the heavy breath of disillusionment. The rush of crowded trains, the endless flicker of neon, the hollow chatter of offices, these had left him restless and weary. His heart longed for something he could not name, a meaning beyond deadlines and the accumulation of small, forgettable victories. When his grandfather passed away, Akira discovered among his belongings an old journal. Inside were notes on Zen teachings, sketches of gardens, and poems written in an elegant, faded hand. In the final entry, his grandfather had written, "If you find yourself adrift, seek the garden. It will not speak with words, but it will answer. And so Akira had come, carrying grief, curiosity, and the faint hope that silence might heal what the noise of the world had broken. Chapter 2: The Keeper of the Garden. The temple itself was simple, weathered wood and stone, unpretentious against the backdrop of cedar-covered hills. The garden lay behind it, enclosed by a low wall, its white sand shining faintly beneath the morning sun. There, an elderly monk moved with deliberate slowness, rake in hand. His robe brushed the ground as he dragged lines across the sand, erasing yesterday's patterns to form new ones. When he noticed Akira standing by the gate, he paused. His eyes, bright yet soft with age, held the young man's gaze. "You have come to see the garden," the monk said. Akira bowed slightly, unsure of the proper form. "Yes. I don't know why, but I felt drawn here." The monk nodded. "The garden does not need to explain itself. It simply is. Sit, if you like. Watch." So Akira sat on the wooden veranda, legs crossed, hands on his knees. He watched as the rake moved through the sand, creating waves that seemed to flow around the stones. Each motion was steady, each gesture complete in itself. After a long silence, Akira asked, "Why do you change the patterns every day? Aren't yesterday's lines already perfect?" The monk smiled faintly. "Perfection is not something we preserve. It is something we practice. The garden lives in the act of shaping it, not in clinging to what was made." Akira let the words sink into him like drops of rain into dry earth. Chapter 3: Stones that Remember. Days passed. Akira returned each morning, sitting quietly as the monk tended the garden. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he said nothing at all. Slowly, the city's urgency loosened its grip on Akira's chest. One morning, the monk gestured toward the largest stone in the garden, tall and rough, its surface flecked with patches of lichen. "That stone is called the Guardian," he said. "It has stood here for centuries. Generations of monks have raked the sand around it. The world has changed beyond these walls, but the stone remains." Akira studied it, imagining storms, wars, and passing seasons, all endured in silence. "Does the stone remember?" he asked. The monk's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps it does. Or perhaps it teaches us that memory itself is like sand shifting, reshaped by each new wind. What matters is not what the stone has seen, but what we see in the stone." For the first time, Akira felt a flicker of peace. It was as if the garden had spoken not in words, but in stillness. Chapter 4: The Mirror of Silence. One evening, after a day of walking in the hills, Akira returned to the garden at twilight. The monks had finished their chores, and the temple was hushed. He sat alone before the sand and stone, the sky deepening into indigo. In the quiet, his thoughts began to surface: grief for his grandfather, anger at himself for never asking the old man about his past, guilt for the way he had drifted through life without purpose. The stillness of the garden did not push these feelings away. Instead, it reflected them, as water reflects the face of one who peers into it. Akira saw his restlessness more clearly than ever. And yet, within that recognition, there was no judgment, only acceptance, as if the garden whispered, "This too belongs. This too is part of the pattern." Tears welled in his eyes, but he did not look away. For the first time, he allowed his sorrow to sit beside him, no longer an enemy but a guest. Chapter 5: The Lesson of Impermanence. The following morning, Akira helped the monk rake the garden. His hands were clumsy at first, the rake catching unevenly in the sand. But the monk only chuckled. "Do not try to control the sand. Move with it. Let the rake flow." As Akira relaxed, the lines grew smoother. He felt a strange joy in the simple rhythm, the arc of the rake, the hush of sand moving aside. When they finished, the monk leaned on his rake. "Remember, the pattern will not last. Tomorrow, the lines will be gone." Akira nodded slowly. "But the act of making the M that remains with me." The monk smiled. "Yes. That is enough." Chapter 6: Shadows of the Past. One afternoon, while walking near the temple gate, Akira encountered an old woman from the village. She studied him curiously. "You remind me of someone," she said. "Years ago, a man often came here. He sat in the garden for hours, just as you do. Was he your grandfather, perhaps?" Akira's breath caught. "Yes, I think so." The woman nodded. "He carried his sorrows, but the garden gave him peace. He told me once that the silence here was like hearing the voice of the earth itself." Hearing this, Akira felt a thread connecting him not only to his grandfather but to all who had ever sat before the garden, seeking, grieving, questioning. The reflections in the sand were not his alone, they belonged to countless others across time. Chapter 7: The Ripple of Choice. Seasons turned. The cherry trees beyond the wall bloomed and shed their petals. Rains came, and the sand darkened with moisture. Akira's days grew slower, more deliberate. Yet a question lingered: would he stay in the temple forever, or return to the city? Was the garden a refuge only, or a beginning? One evening, he asked the monk, "Should I remain here, tending the garden? Or should I go back and face the world I left?" The monk set down his rake. "The garden is not meant to keep you. It is meant to prepare you. Reflection is only half the path, action is the other. You must carry what you have seen here into the noise of the world." Akira felt both fear and clarity. The city had not changed, but perhaps he had. Chapter 8: The Journey Beyond the Walls. On his last morning, Akira rose before dawn. The monk was already in the garden, raking fresh lines into the sand. Akira bowed deeply. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me how to listen." The monk placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do not thank me. Thank the stones, the sand, the silence. They will remain, even when you are gone." As Akira walked down the path away from the temple, the air was filled with the sound of birds awakening. Behind him, the garden lay still, its lines shining in the morning light. Ahead, the city awaited. But within him, the reflection of the garden endured a pattern not fixed in sand, but alive in his own heart. Epilogue reflections without end. Years later, when Akira sat in crowded trains or hurried streets, he would sometimes close his eyes. In the hum of engines or the chatter of strangers, he would hear the faint hush of sand being raked. He would see the guardian stone, unmoving, patient. He would remember his grandfather's words, "If you find yourself adrift, seek the garden." And he would know the garden was never left behind. It was within him, a reflection that needed no walls, no rakes, no stones. A reminder that stillness is not the absence of motion, but the presence of clarity. The Zen garden remained, eternal in its impermanence, a mirror for all who sought themselves within its quiet embrace. The sparrow's first call. The village of Hanamura lay nestled at the foot of the eastern mountains, where the first rays of dawn touched the world with pale gold. In this quiet place, time seemed to move with the rhythm of nature, each day rising and falling with the same gentle harmony. Yet to those who listened closely, every morning carried its own subtle story. It always began with the sparrow's first call. The sparrows of Hanamura were small, brown birds with quick wings and restless energy. Their chatter filled the thatched roofs and temple eaves, their presence so familiar that few paid much attention. But to Haruto, a boy of 15 who rose before the sun each day, the sparrow's first call was more than just a sound. It was a signal that the world was awakening, and that another day of learning and growing had begun. Haruto lived with his grandmother, Aki, in a small wooden house at the edge of the rice fields. His parents had passed away when he was a child, leaving him with only fragments of memory. The scent of sandalwood from his father's robes, the gentle lullabies sung by his mother. His grandmother raised him with quiet strength, her wrinkled hands guiding him in everything from planting seedlings to reciting ancient poems. Each dawn, Haruto would wake to the cool air drifting in through the paper shoji doors. The village still slept, wrapped in the shadows of the night, but outside, he would hear the high, clear note of a sparrow perched on the roof beam. That sound, so small yet so steady, always stirred something inside him, a reminder that life, no matter how uncertain, would begin again. One particular morning in early spring, when mist clung to the fields and dew sparkled on the grass, Haruto rose with a feeling he could not explain. The sparrow's call came sharper than usual, almost insistent, as though urging him not to waste the day. He dressed quickly and slipped outside, barefoot on the wooden veranda, and watched the first light spread over the village. The sparrow darted across the sky, its wings catching the glow of dawn. Haruto followed it with his eyes, sensing a quiet invitation. He gathered his satchel and made his way along the path to the temple, where Master Shinji, the old monk, often shared lessons with the young villagers. Shinji was known for his patience, though his eyes carried the weight of years. He often spoke in riddles, and many of the children left his teachings puzzled. But Haruto lingered after the lessons, listening longer, asking questions. He wanted to understand the world beyond what he saw in the rice fields and gardens. That morning, Haruto arrived before anyone else. The temple bell had not yet been rung, and the garden was still in shadow. He found Master Shinji sweeping the stone path, his broom moving in steady, deliberate strokes. "You are early," the monk said, his voice soft as the breeze. "I heard the sparrow," Haruto replied, bowing slightly. "It called me awake before the sun." Shinji's lips curved into the faintest smile. The sparrow knows when the day begins, though the world has yet to notice. "Tell me, Haruto, why do you listen to such a small voice?" Haruto hesitated, glancing toward the trees. "Because it feels true. Even when everything is still, the sparrow sings. I want to know why." The monk leaned on his broom, regarding him with thoughtful eyes. "Perhaps it sings not to explain, but simply because it must. Not every truth is spoken in words, Haruto. Some truths live only in the act itself." The boy pondered this as the temple bell rang, summoning the others. Yet the words stayed with him long after the lessons ended. That evening, while his grandmother cooked rice and simmered vegetables, Haruto told her what Master Shinji had said. Aki smiled, her eyes shining with a distant light. "Your grandfather used to say the same. He believed sparrows carried the breath of the morning inside them. They remind us that life is not to be measured only by what we understand, but also by what we feel." Days passed, and spring deepened into summer. The rice paddies shimmered with green, and the air grew heavy with the hum of cicadas. Yet still, each dawn, Haruto woke to the sparrow's call. Sometimes it seemed cheerful, sometimes solemn, but always it was there. And with each call, he felt himself changing, growing not only in strength but also in awareness. One morning, after a night of restless dreams, Haruto walked beyond the village, following the sparrow's path toward the mountains. The trail wound through cedar forests and past streams that sang over smooth stones. He carried no destination in mind, only the quiet pull of the bird's voice. At last, he came upon a clearing where sunlight spilled onto a mossy shrine, long abandoned. The wooden beams were worn, the offerings long gone, yet the place held a stillness that drew him to his knees. A sparrow perched on the shrine's roof, watching him with bright, unblinking eyes. In that moment, Haruto felt something stir deep within him. The sparrow's call was not just a sound, it was a bridge between the silence of night and the promise of day, between what had been lost and what could be found. He bowed his head, whispering a vow he did not fully understand. "I will listen. To the sparrow, to the wind, to the voices of this world that speak without words. I will carry them within me." When he returned to Hanamura, he was different, though none could say how. His grandmother noticed the calm in his eyes. Master Shinji saw the steadiness in his steps. And each dawn, when the sparrow sang, Haruto no longer heard only a bird's call. He heard the beginning of all things, fragile yet eternal. Years later, when Haruto himself became a teacher in the village, children would often ask him why he rose so early each morning. He would smile, gaze toward the rooftops, and say, "Because the sparrow calls. And in its small, clear song, I hear the voice of life itself." And so, in Hanamura, the days continued, each one born from the sparrow's first call, carrying with it the quiet promise that even the smallest voices can awaken the deepest truths. Twilight through the paper screens. The village of Aokawa lay quietly at the foot of the northern hills, where the river bent in a slow, silver curve. It was a place where time seemed softened, where the fields and paths carried echoes of centuries past. In the evenings, when the day surrendered its weight, the homes glowed faintly from within, their light filtered by the delicate paper screens that framed each room. It was in such a room, behind one of those screens, that 16-year-old Ren sat cross-legged, listening to the last sounds of the day fading away. His grandmother crept behind him, preparing tea. The smell of roasted barley drifted into the air, mingling with the faint scent of pine from the wood that framed their home. Ren pressed his palm lightly against the paper screen. On the other side, twilight had begun to spread a gentle indigo haze that painted the garden in soft strokes. The silhouettes of plum branches swayed slowly, and he could hear the trickle of water from the bamboo spout that filled, tipped, and emptied again, steady as a heartbeat. "Ren," his grandmother's voice came, calm and measured, "why do you sit so still, staring at the screens? The evening will not stay for long." "I like the way the light changes," Ren replied. "It feels like the world is holding its breath. Like something is waiting to be spoken, but never is." His grandmother smiled softly as she poured the tea. "Twilight always carries secrets. The paper screens only let us catch a glimpse of them. The rest we must imagine." The weight of twilight. Ren's parents had left Aokawa years ago, chasing opportunities in the distant city, and since then, his grandmother had been both guardian and teacher. She taught him to sweep the garden stones each morning, to bow to the shrine in silence, and to notice the colors of the sky as carefully as one might study a written poem. But Ren was restless. While his grandmother found contentment in quiet rituals, he longed for something beyond them, some proof that the world contained more than what the paper screens revealed. When twilight spread each evening, he felt torn between the safety of home and the beckoning of shadows. One evening, as cicadas hushed and the air turned cool, Ren noticed a flicker of movement across the garden. Beyond the plum tree, just at the edge where light and shadow tangled, a figure seemed to stand. It was not solid but faint, like smoke lingering in the air. Ren blinked. The figure remained. It was shaped like a young woman, her hair long, her robe flowing like water. She did not step forward, nor did she turn away. She stood as though waiting for something or someone. Ren's breath caught, and before he could speak, the last of the light faded. The figure dissolved into the night. A whisper through screens. The next day, Ren tried to push the memory aside, but as twilight came again, his eyes returned to the garden. He sat once more before the paper screens, heart racing as the shadows lengthened. And there she was again. The faint figure, standing where garden met forest, was watching in silence. This time, Ren dared to speak, though his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Who are you?" No answer came, but the bamboo spout tipped, water splashing into the stone basin, and in its rhythm, he thought he heard a reply. Not words, exactly, but something like a sigh carried on the air. His grandmother entered then, and when Ren looked again, the figure was gone. "You're distracted tonight," she said, setting down a small tray. "Your tea will grow cold." Ren hesitated before asking, "Grandmother, have you ever seen something in the garden?" "Someone, maybe?" She paused, her gaze thoughtful. "This house has stood for many generations. The screens have hidden as much as they have revealed. Perhaps what you saw was real. Perhaps it was your longing." Ren frowned. But she was there. His grandmother touched his shoulder gently. "Even so, sometimes twilight calls to those who listen too closely." The stories of Aokawa. Days passed, and the figure continued to appear, always at twilight, always silent. Ren began to sense a rhythm in her presence, as though her form was woven into the very fabric of dusk. When he finally told his friend Kato, the son of a local woodcutter, the boy laughed nervously. "You shouldn't look too hard at shadows," Kato warned. "My father says there are spirits that wander at dusk. They slip between our world and theirs, and if you meet their eyes too long, they might carry you away." Ren, however, felt no fear. If anything, he felt a strange comfort when the figure appeared, as though the quiet he could never quite explain to others was now shared by another. Still, he wondered, who was she? Why did she appear only when the day dissolved into evening? The voice of twilight. One evening, unable to restrain himself, Ren slid open the paper screen and stepped barefoot into the garden. The cool stones pressed against his feet, and the evening air smelled of damp earth and pine. The figure was there, clearer than ever, her robe pale as the moonlight now rising. "Please," Ren said softly, "tell me who you are." For the first time, the figure moved. Her head turned slightly, and though her face remained veiled by shadow, Ren heard a voice soft, fragile, like wind through reeds. "I am what remains of a song." Ren's heart quickened. "A song? A song once sung here," the voice continued, faint as though spoken from a great distance. "Long ago. It was carried on evenings like this, through the paper screens. But songs fade. I stayed." Ren felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask more, but already the twilight was slipping into night, and with it, she grew fainter. "Wait," he called, but she dissolved into the darkness. Inheritance of silence. From that night onward, Ren understood that the figure was no ordinary ghost, nor a dream. She was something left behind, an echo, perhaps, of a life once lived within those same walls. His grandmother listened quietly when he told her. For a long moment, she said nothing, then finally spoke. "Do you remember your mother's lullabies, Ren?" He nodded faintly. Only a little. The sound, not the words. "Songs are threads," his grandmother said. "They tie us to one another, and to time itself. When the singer is gone, sometimes the thread remains, drifting. Perhaps what you see is a thread not yet severed." Ren thought of the figure's words, "I am what remains of a song." That evening, he sat before the paper screens not only to watch, but to listen. And when the figure appeared once more, he whispered, not to demand, not to question, but simply to share. "I will remember you," he said. "Even if you are only a song. I will listen." The figure seemed to bow her head, and though no words followed, Ren felt something shift in the iris, stillness deeper than silence, as if the twilight itself had acknowledged him. Epilogue through the screens. Years later, when Ren had grown into a young man and his grandmother had passed on, he remained in the house by the garden. Visitors sometimes asked why he lingered in the evenings, sitting before the pale glow of the paper screens, watching as twilight softened the world. He would only smile, pouring tea with calm hands. And if they listened closely, they too might hear it, the faintest echo of a voice at dusk. Woven with the rhythm of water, carried gently through the paper screens. For twilight always carries secrets, and some songs never truly fade.